Thanks, everyone. Yeah, as Eleanor mentioned, I'm very much looking forward to looking at this process too. I think being a big water lover, even just putting together that slideshow and looking at it the other night, it just felt oddly relaxing, even though if you picture you're some dust or ash in an alchemical lab and someone's pouring acid on you, it might not feel as relaxing, but hopefully you guys will enjoy it.
So I guess, yeah, let's go ahead and get started. I do want to remind you of what we talked about last time very briefly at the beginning, which is the idea that there are three states of learning or awareness, kind of experiential awareness, I guess. And that was the lunar, the solar, and the stellar. And the lunar is a very receptive, meditative quality. The solar is very logical and analytical, and the stellar is integrative. And so that's how we're trying to organize the material. And so like last time, Penny is going to have a slideshow of images, which is going to be more of a lunar experience, very receptive, in fact, the whole idea of dissolution works well with this, just kind of like letting the images wash over you, seeing what your response is. Then I'll share the handout in a slideshow of facts and figures and the boring stuff. I'll try to go quickly, and that'll be the solar energy. And then John will guide us through a discussion of the related tarot cards, and that will be the integrative. So that will be the stellar awareness. And then after this time, we're going to start cycling through. So we'll take on each other's jobs so that you don't have to always hear me lecture or whatever. So that's kind of the plan for today, and I'm going to hand it off straight to Penny.
So yeah, what we're going to do is watch a probably about 3-4 minute slideshow of some different images that have to do with the second stage of dissolution. And then after that, we're going to take a few minutes to do a different kind of discussion than what we did last time. Some of you might be familiar with a process called lectio divina. It's more of a Christian mystic process of engaging with material, whether it's something you're reading or looking at or meditating upon. And typically or traditionally, lectio divina has 4 parts. There's the lectio part, which is the observation or the reading of something or viewing. The meditatio, which is what it sounds like, the meditation. Then the contemplatio, which is a little different than the meditation. The meditation is meant to be kind of receptive, where the contemplatio is more seeking answers. And then oratio, which is can either be prayer, but it can also be responsive dialogue. So it's dialogue that's not meant to be explanatory or analytical. It's supposed to be responsive. So, for example, when we're looking at an image, we'll look at 1 or 2 of these in this manner at the end of the slideshow. You would just let your gaze fall on the whole thing, and then out loud, you would share something that's coming to you in the form of just 1 or 2 words or a very short phrase. So you're not analyzing it. You're not talking like in a discussion based way. So for example, you could say the color blue or tall tree or blue sky, but you could also say something you're feeling or experiencing, like, curiosity or sadness, or if there's a very short question, like, why is he smiling, or whatever is in the image. And so it's meant to show how you're responding to what you're seeing and what's catching your consciousness, and then you're sharing that with the rest of us, as opposed to, explaining it and giving us a bunch of analyzing and all that. So we'll watch the slideshow, and then there'll be a page just that will play for just like a minute to kind of quick recap the instructions for the lectio divina or the oratio. And then once we go to that image, we'll just maybe take half a minute of silence to kind of let that sink in. Or as Joy put, no pun intended, let it wash over you. And then if you're ready to start saying something, just go ahead and say whatever's coming. Now, obviously on Zoom, it's a little different because you can't really see when other people are about to speak. So there will be times, I'm sure, when 2 or 3 people might speak at the same time. That's totally okay, because the point is that you're responding rather than trying to teach or convey information. Okay. So each slide is about 15 seconds. So did it just switch?
It's going, yes.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, my apologies. Okay, so oddly enough, there's a parade coming down my street that in probably about 3 minutes is going to get really loud. So I'm just going to review the basic steps and then I'll mute myself and we'll go to the image or two that we'll be working with. So again, it's just very 1 or 2 words or very simple phrases, and you're trying to be in a meditative and responsive mode. And so whatever's coming to you as you are gazing at the image is what you'll be sharing. And again, it can be actual observations and content of the image, or it can be feelings or brief questions. And so we'll go a couple minutes on each. There'll be this one and then one more.
Trapped or free?
Three birds.
Connected.
Wrestling.
Birds fighting.
Studying.
Oppositions.
Blue cloaks.
Surrender or giving up.
Duality.
Unification.
Expanse of the sky.
Curious about people.
Brown. Offering.
Vial.
Cloudy.
Okay, I apologize again for the noise. I'm going to go to one more image for a couple minutes. This one's a little more abstract, so it might be a little more feelings based, but we'll take another minute or two in the same form here.
Stained glass.
Mosaic.
Peaceful.
Source.
Life-giving.
Fractal. Angel.
Inviting.
Escape.
Subconscious.
Cleansing.
Illumination.
Happy bubbles.
light penetrating.
Yes. Revealed.
Cold.
Bliss.
Heavy and light at the same time.
Obscurity in the distance. Alone.
Infinite.
Illusions.
Solitude.
Changeable.
Hope.
Rebirth.
Reflection.
Powerful.
Still yet in motion.
Refraction.
Shifting.
Well, let's just take about 30 seconds maybe to just silently meditate once more on this, and then I'll go ahead and stop the screen share.
Silence.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I really want to jump into a swimming pool about now. All that blue, that inviting water is just so calming. And as people, we're so attracted to the water, whether we like our bathtubs or lakes or rivers. But yeah, the slideshow was really fun to make and review. Yeah, someone wrote snorkeling for sure. And just kind of this last minute before I hand it to Joy, do you guys have any comments on that style of discussion or sharing, or had any of you done that? For personally, for me, it's kind of my favorite, but what did you guys think?
It's nice to just be able to kind of drop in. Especially for me, I wasn't feeling very grounded when I started today.
Yeah, drop in is nice. Yeah.
I liked hearing everybody else what they said because it really made me sort of think about it a little deeper too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you're responding rather than thinking about what you have to say.
Yeah, Cheryl pointed out, unless you've nearly drowned, and then it can be frightening and heavy. And I felt the same way with the flood, especially with what's going on. Yeah, some of that stuff can be very triggering and very scary.
For sure. Yeah, these processes both have kind of their buoyant, feel good parts, and then their parts that are definitely, uncomfortable at the very least. Yeah, for sure.
And I think this has both a little bit more than maybe calcination did, which is an interesting observation, I think.
For sure. Yeah. I'm actually pretty afraid of being in water. Like, I'm not a great swimmer, and I've had a couple experiences, but I just still feel so attracted to it, you know? Yeah. Well, thank you guys for participating in that. That was really great. I loved hearing what you all had to say. And I think it's just such a peaceful, relaxing way to talk about an image. So thank you.
Okay, so I'm the solar person today, and so I am going to take you through a slideshow with all the facts and figures that you need to know. So today we're doing Tarot and Alchemy Dissolution, and here's what I'm covering with you today. What is dissolution? The planet Jupiter, the metal tin, the placement, is this, I might have changed the order as I went along, we'll see. The placement in the thema mundi, some dissolution meditations and practices that you can do. And then we'll start to move into some of the tarot card representations, and then I'll hand it off to John. So dissolution is the second step, and it is to take the remnants of the unredeemed matter and release even its bones. And the idea here is the black crow on the left is looking at looking at himself having been melted. So dissolution means to dissolve into liquid or to dissolve through the agency of liquid. In this alchemical stage, the ashes of the calcination are dissolved in a solvent, particularly if you're working with a spagyrics process. And it's associated with the phrase or the word interiora, which means looking within. The experience of dissolution can be different for everyone, as we've just kind of seen through that previous slideshow. In a solution, two things become one, and the unredeemed matter melts into a boundless sea. And so the feelings that go along with that are of loss, drowning, complete loss of identity, nowhere to get your footing, swept up in an undesired current, complete loss of control. Like I said, the news was again really heavy this week, and one of the horrible stories, but hopefully there's some funny aspects about it, but in Pennsylvania, there was an explosion in a chocolate making factory, and a woman was saved. She actually caught on fire. And the worst of it was that they smelled gas, and they kept reporting it to the boss saying, dude, there is gas here. You know, what are we supposed to do? Shouldn't we evacuate? And he said, no, I need to get permission from the higher ups. And he didn't evacuate them, and a bunch of people died. But the woman that was saved, her arm caught fire, but then the floor let out underneath her, and she fell into a vat of melted chocolate. And it saved her life. So there was still a lot of very, even for her, she was badly injured and lost for, I think, days. So it was still very, very difficult. But all of these things, and yet it was chocolate. And there's like some joyfulness, there's some fun to the story, even in all the tragedy. And I think that's part of what this experience of dissolution is all about. Finally, just simply the releasing through tears. Oh, these pictures are backwards. I frequently let PowerPoint put things together for me, and sometimes I forget to reorder them because PowerPoint never knows the order I want. Solution is the one Penny showed us. That should be on the left, and the one with the three birds with crowns should be the one on the right. It's separation, which is the next step associated with Mars. And I was doing a talk a couple weeks ago on the Saturn and Neptune cycle, and we were talking about Pisces and Aries, and Pisces is associated via the thema mundi with dissolution phase, and Aries with the separation phase. And so if you look at the three birds in the vial, when I was looking at these images to talk about that presentation, and I saw these in sequence, the first thing I thought is into the fray, getting fighting your way towards something. And then here is the three victors, the gold, the silver, and the bronze Olympic medal winners. And you can even see that someone over here is being crowned. And so this, to me, I compared it to the Olympics and this idea of when you're in the middle of your competition, whether it's an individual thing, you're just trying to do your best, like ice skating or something, or whether it is a bigger competition, even a team sport, a one-on-one competition of some kind. When you're in the middle of it, you can often not know what's going on around you, and you're just in the middle of it, and you're in the fray, and you don't know, or am I the one on top? Am I the one on the bottom? I don't even know. I don't know where I am. I'm so lost. I have no sense of direction. And it's only afterwards that everybody gets untangled and separated out, and okay, you did the best, you go on the top rung, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, and I think we're already seeing that this there's a little contrariness or contradiction that's showing up in dissolution. You can also get so completely in the flow that nothing else matters. Everything else melts away, and you are just 100% focused on your goal and what you're doing and where you're supposed to be, how you're supposed to move, whatever it is that I'm imagining ice skating myself. So whatever you're imagining, you're just totally in the flow with it. And that's also an example of dissolution, both being totally lost and confused, but also totally being in the flow. So this stage is associated with the planet Jupiter. It's the largest planet, so it's considered to expand what it comes in contact with. Jupiter is the advisor, the teacher, and the priest. He's considered wise, generous, and jovial. Of course, his Roman name is Jove. And astrologers call it the greater benefic. It brings luck and ease to things. Jupiter follows the sun's path, the ecliptic, more closely than any other planet does. And as a result, Jupiter tends to take on some of the characteristics of the sun. And is considered a leader, is considered to bring light into a situation. It's also particularly characterized as a counselor to the king, and the sun is generally the king. According to medical astrology, Jupiter rules the liver and the blood. I have heard it associated with the skin, which is the largest organ of the body, although I've also heard that assigned to Saturn. But Jupiter's generosity leads to overindulgence and obesity. Those are some of the things that are associated with that planet. So if you have Jupiter ruled planet in your 6th, watch out. Sometimes in your 1st, those are things that you want to watch out for. Jupiter rules the zodiacal signs of Sagittarius and Pisces, and it's exalted in Cancer. Its symbols are the lightning bolt, the sound of thunder, rain, the oak tree, the eagle, and the scepter. Again, a scepter as a symbol of authority. Tin, I'm not going to talk a lot about tin because I don't know anything about it, but this is what I got out of Dennis Houck's book, and I also tried to double check everything as best I could. It's shiny and silvery white, and Houck describes it as the Romans called it white lead. It looks like an improved or perfected form of lead. So that makes sense from it starting out lead at the Saturn level and now going up to the next level, the Jupiter level. It's looking already like it's been perfected to a degree. The tin veins, he says zigzag, Houck says zigzag through the earth like lightning bolts. That's very cool. It doesn't rust. It's found with other precious metals like gold and silver. It's associated with sound. Tin sheets are used for sound effects to make thunder. Houck says tinfoil. It's like, no. I've worked in the theater. It's not tinfoil that they use. I don't know if he's imagining crumpling it up. They're big sheets of metal and you shake them and they make a very loud noise. And it has a crystalline structure, and when those crystals are broken, it emits an eerie cry. But it's also used in an alloy like a high tin ratio with copper in a high tin ratio of bronze to make bells, so which are very beautiful sounding. So it can be scary, eerie, beautiful. It has a tetragonal crystalline structure, which I had to read a bunch of articles to figure out what the heck that was. I'm like, tetra I know is 4, so it's got to be related to Jupiter, whose number is 4. And I finally figured out that it is the 3 axes, 2 of them are the equal length, so that does make a square. And then the third one is longer, making the overall ratio rectangular. But you can see over here that the cleavage pattern also can sometimes be octagonal and some other things like that. But Jupiter's number is 4, and so the planar shape for Jupiter is a square. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Tin pest, or also tin leprosy, that under certain conditions, it can get blisters and turn to white dust, and can actually infect other tin surfaces. Interesting, Hauck states that there's a lot of tin in the skin, and we have seen that some people assign the skin to Jupiter, and blisters and white dust can look like, if you have any skin problems at all or dry skin, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Blisters and dry dust can look like skin that's not at its optimum health, looks like skin diseases, and even the word tin leprosy. Tin is mostly used in alloys, and I think that indicates that it's very supportive of the other planets. The Tin Woodman. In the book and movie The Wizard of Oz, the character, the Tin Man, was looking for a heart. Dorothy found the Tin Man rusted in the woods. We know tin doesn't rust, so he might have had some steel in him or something, and released him by applying oil to his joints. Tin is associated with Jupiter, the traditional ruler of Pisces. Oil is associated with Neptune, the modern ruler of Pisces. One of the correspondences for Pisces is unconditional love. Also, the first metal that tin was alloyed with was copper, and that was the beginning of the Bronze Age. And copper is ruled by Venus, the goddess of love. So the Tin Woodman, the symbology, the alchemical symbology of the Tin Woodman is like spot on. The Thema Mundi. The Pisces, and if you want to know more about that, my recent blog post, one of my recent blog posts, I can get you the link a little bit later when I'm done with this. One of my recent blog posts has a description of how the Thema Mundi works in alchemy, but I'm not going to go into it right now. So according to the Thema Mundi, the stage that we're at, dissolution, is associated with Pisces. It's the final sign of the zodiac and represents complete dissolution. This immersion can range from a total loss of individuality in a sea of homogeneity, all the way through to a sense of communion with the divine. At the end of the cycle, Pisces also prepares for the beginning. It is symbolic of gestation, inner or hidden growth, totally dependent on another being with no awareness of self. The gestating being is born into Aries, which is our next stage, separation, and Aries is symbolic of identity. So dissolution is still, like calcination, is loss of identity. Jupiter's spirituality is highlighted in Pisces. His role of priest comes to the forefront. Meditation, silence, stillness, fasting, emptying the self to be filled with the spirit of the divine. So going into our meditations, this is the one that I've been enjoying the most from what Hauck listed, and it's the Ben Marie meditation. And very simply, you activate the energy center in the belly, the tanden, the lower tanden or the hara. Feel that heating up, and then activate the heart center, the middle tanden. And then imagine this being a Ben Marie is like a double boiler. So imagine the lower tanden as being the lower part of the double boiler, with the hot water in it, and then the middle tanden being the upper part of that double boiler that you put your chocolate chips in or whatever to melt them. And here we're going to place our difficulties, our diseases, our things that we want to release, and just feel them melt away. It's very easy meditation, and I found it very effective and very calming. I've got some other meditations and practices for you, including a couple that I do myself. And the tarot cards, Jupiter is the Wheel of Fortune, Pisces is the Moon, the Dissolution is also associated with Cancer, and that is the Chariot card. Robert Place talks about dissolution with the High Priestess primarily, but also he includes the Empress and the Hierophant. And then the Tower is he calls it the Greater Dissolution. Particularly, he's got an kind of an icon deck version of his alchemical deck that is a little bit more to the point, I think, or simple. To the point is probably good in terms of explaining some of these things. And so the cards in the 3x3 are the High Priestess and the Hermit and the Tower. And so I'm going to hand that off to John so that he can tell us about that.
Wow, that was a whirlwind tour right there of solar information. So it's like, it's how do you transition from that into the stellar, especially when you're not like completely prepared for the stellar at the moment. But I'll do my best. So we'll pick up with recapping a little bit of our tableau. So we are covering obviously the dissolution. These are some of the some key phrases that I had come up with in terms of describing the applications of this particular phase of alchemy, both either mostly psychologically, but also in a psycho-spiritual sense. And what are the things that how does go into in great depth is that this is a process of really, whereas calcination was a cremation of all the ego-bound structures that have been built up by us over time. And this is the washing of that ash that is left behind. So he does definitely psychologically couch this in terms of the total surrender of the ego and the total immersion into the subconscious mind. It requires a bit of letting go of conscious control, to be sure, and diminishment of that ego power, which means we further lose our identities when we enter the second stage. Whatever we experienced in calcination doesn't measure up to what we experienced here. But it's fair to point out that both of these stages, both of these operations in alchemy, both constitute what's known as nigredo, the blackening stage of alchemy. This is where a lot of the dross is purged initially, and then first by fire, and now by water, by dissolving. And it's here where we confront a lot of our, repressed things, because that's, if we're confronting our own subconscious, we're not just confronting all of the good things in there, but we're also confronting all the dark things that we keep repressed. And these are the things that we are asked to work upon rather than just simply acknowledge, and in order for us to completely get past them. So in terms of the actual column that we work with here, again, I'm just going to do a little refresher that we have each portion of the column is corresponding to an essence. Now, so the base of that pillar is the element of the essence of salt, which is it stands for the conditions of the phase, the body of the substance, and the effect that the whole process has upon the substance itself. Whereas the second section above it is Mercury. Those are the laws by which this whole process is operating upon. And the upper portion is sulfur, the principles of the cause of the whole matter. Now, in this particular case, we have at the base of the pillar, we have the Tower as our salt card. And I'm using Paul Foster Case's definitions of some of these cards and some of his associations he makes with them. He associates this phase with the stage of awakening, 7 stages of unfoldment, as he describes them. Unfoldment is because we are revealing things that are already existent within ourselves rather than obtaining or discovering them. But this is the case of breaking down the last remaining false structures that the ego has put in place. On the Mercury level, we have the Hermit card. Case, he associates this with the quality of response, and this is a response to the ultimate principle that is involved in all of creation. But in this specific case, he's answering to the card above it, which is the cause of the whole thing. And this is the individual response to the whole, the individual response to the primal cause. But one of the qualities that how does describe in his book of the person who has experienced calcination, along with their retraction of their ego, is a retraction of the projections that the ego does put up in response to their interactions with the outside world. Things that we often dislike in ourselves, we project upon other people. But these projections and judgments fall away once the dissolution takes place. Finally, we have at the sulfur level, we have the High Priestess. Case equates this card with the subconscious mind itself, a part of the mind that has perfect memory, perfect powers of deduction, and perfect connections with all things. So let's actually, I think I probably will open up the discussion with this last card, the High Priestess, starting at the top of this pillar and with the cause and the whole idea of the High Priestess as the subconscious. I'd like to comment upon that. And then it's paying attention to some of the symbology that's present in either both these BOTA cards or common to all versions of the High Priestess.
John, one thing I want to say about perfect is that it's such a loaded word, I think, in our culture. But I think in this context, because like in the Wiccan tradition, you talk about perfect love and perfect trust. It doesn't mean that it's not perfect in that rigid sense of things, where if you don't do it right, you're like thrilled, It's more about what perfect means, I think, in this context is full alignment. So when you're fully aligned with memory, when you're fully aligned with deduction, when you're fully aligned with connecting with all things, and aligned with, the divine and all of that. So anyway, I just wanted to add that.
you could also think of it, I mean, a lot of ways that he uses the word in terms of perfect memory, and for example, would be, the absolute state of it. It will remember practically every aspect of human experience, no matter whether you consciously know about it or not. It's all there, and it contains that record of every experience you've ever had.
I'd like to just point out something on the High Priestess card. Speaking of perfect, the cross that is on her chest has both lines of it equal, signifying, in my view, what is called in the Picatrix perfect nature. So there is a little snippet in one of the chapters of the Picatrix where Hermes Trismegistus calls on perfect nature, and perfect nature is all of our aspects, or all of the four elements combined in us in a perfect alignment. And to me, that's what that cross means, that, like, as we were talking about perfect alignment, and I see it there in the cross.
It's a perfect alignment of above and below, and to left and right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And crossing the heart too. So it's not necessarily knowledge or a balance that is achieved as, in terms of conscious effort. This is one that's, more regulated on a more subconscious basis. Yeah,
it's like that feeling of knowing rather than knowing that you know. It's like feeling the truth, feeling the perfect alignment. That's not necessarily an experience in the head. It's more of an experience in the heart.
It sounds like intuition.
Yeah.
John, I'm also taken by all the symbols of balance in the Priestess, the High Priestess card. And then that kind of in contrast to the Tower, where it feels like everything's out of, the people are falling off the Tower. There's not the balance there. So I'm just noticing that.
Right, there's balance, and there's also that contrast of peace with the High Priestess, and that a lot of alarming discord in the Tower. In fact, you could also, I can bring just one thing up about this with the High Priestess esoterically is, it is associated with the letter Gimel, which is a double letter, and that's at the double quality that it's attributed is, I believe, peace and strife. Is that correct? Yeah, that's right. And then we have that qualities being exerted, I think, in both the Hermit and the Tower, can be reflected in that sense.
Well, looking at the subconscious via the lens of the High Priestess, there's kind of a twofold operation. And one is, like, from our conscious point of view, you might see the subconscious as being like the origin of a belief or a behavior or a pattern. And in a sense it is, but if you were kind of in those waters below, and as Case sees it, the subconscious is that which also receives the suggestion or directive from the consciousness, and then is that which builds those patterns. So the subconscious plane of the High Priestess has received, the channel directive from the magician, who has received it from the Fool. And so it's kind of doing double duty, as in it's this source, but it's also that which takes direction.
Does anybody have anything to add to that?
Can you say a little bit more about the Hermit, John?
The Hermit is being in the middle of this. He's the Mercury of the equation. Is the kind of almost, in a way, he is some ways in go between in the process between the sulfur and the salt, but a lot of, and I'm seeing a lot of the symbolism of, let's say, ego being kind of minimized, and it's a withdrawal of that, again, the withdrawal of the ego's projections and judgments as a process of the dissolution of taking place. But there's also one other quality I see in the Hermit in this process, because you are basically trying to get past repressed material. So one of the ways that is stressed to make sure that you really are successful at doing that without getting too emotionally caught up in it is to concentrate on the vital principle of it rather than the emotional experience. It's almost like you become the observer of what it is that you are looking at rather than considering it. You could just consider it maybe almost a separate part of yourself. If you look at that hermit, the hermit staring into his lantern in a way, and it's like saying, okay, this is this part of me that I would like to dissolve. It is now outside of me. I can see this. I'm an observer to this. It is something else. It's not it is not necessarily part of me, but it is something that makes me up. Does that make some sense, or do I need to completely restate that?
No, that helps me a lot.
Also, the hermit is that sense of surrender almost. He's like sitting there up in the hills, just waiting and contemplating and just completely being surrendered to the elements outside of him, like this Buddha under the tree type of energy.
Some say he's in the hills, and others say he's in the wilderness. Which, in either way, I think it's an apt symbol. He's it's kind of like an underground journey that the hermit takes, usually in a lot of those or in-depth types of readings that the hermit would receive. And in these, that's part of the reason why the card is dark in the background, because now he's kind of almost like immersed. He is himself immersed in his own subconscious mind and looking for those things that he wants to confront.
I feel like these three are the different types of ways you can go through dissolution. It can be very painful and come all of a sudden at you. It can be a slow coming process, or you can be completely within alignment with the solution, which is the High Priestess.
I think probably all three of those stages, or all three of those experiences, can be experienced during that process as well. I mean, you may, I sometimes look at this too as not necessarily a linear thing where it's it could be like this is the way that perhaps you begin dissolutions with the tower type of energy, where you get that kind of where everything's broken down, and then you move to the next stage, which is the hermit, and then to the next stage, which is the High Priestess. But then it comes back again, and it comes down once more.
I was also thinking, John, with the hermit, that it's the number 9. And for me, it's kind of, we were talking about being alone in the wilderness and all of that, that it's like the hermit's poised for change. The hermit's ready for a shift and a change to happen as a number 9 card.
Yes, he's definitely, I think, the hermit is where the work of the dissolution takes place. And the other two, I mean, you could look at, if we will look at the High Priestess as the cause and the tower as the conditions, perhaps. And then you can see that maybe this is, also the Hermit has that ability to, go back and forth between these two states. And it's one of the magi's of the deck. Any additional comments about the Tower?
I just find it strange that such a fire card is associated with dissolution. It's like I see why, like that ego death that we experience during dissolution is totally represented in the Tower here, but it's just it's like everything about this card is fire.
Yeah, and then we have also the same kind of contrast with the High Priestess being a watery card at the sulfur and fiery level.
Yeah.
I was just going to share something about the fire, the water. I mean, the water and the fire. Having had some experience in chemistry classes in school and then being a cook, there are some things that won't dissolve except in warm or hot water. So sometimes you have to add heat to it in order to get the whatever the solid is that you've introduced to the liquid to dissolve, to break down into its molecular state. So to me, that makes perfect sense. That's like the fire under the bain-marie, or the water that you throw your sugar into to make syrup out of. It makes perfect sense.
I'm kind of looking at in terms of it being the bain, or representative of the bain-marie. The writings of the bain-marie make mention of heavenly water and the earthly water, which you have the earthly water being the water that is being used to heat the bain-marie from below. And then the heavenly water is the solution itself. So I just look at the Tower as the earthly water, the high Priestess is the heavenly water, and then the Hermit is the bain-marie process itself.
Yeah.
Another option of looking at water in the Tower is this picture that I just dropped into the chat. It's Moonchild Tarot. I think it's still uploading. Yeah, there we go. I like this one because there is like a lake beneath the Tower. So the idea is that people are dropping out. There's this huge cataclysmic experience, and while it's happening to us, we experience it as the worst thing ever and I'm going to die. But the water is there below to remind us that we are going to be caught and we will be safe. And like the idea that the divine has us. So maybe then, we think we're going to die when we come out of the Tower, but then we end up dropping into the water. And that's the dissolution where, we come out, we drag ourselves out onto land and we're wet, but like better off for it.
Penny and a group of us had a conversation about the Tower recently, where we were describing the Tower as the here we go card, like something's happening that's unstoppable. And in terms of that being it doesn't sound like that's an effect, but it's like something that gets the ball rolling. And then the card itself being ruled by Mars and Aries, there's a lot of personal power and assertiveness and initiative that can come from this card, because it's calling us to a certain kind of right action, and so it's moving us towards that Hermit, which at this stage of the development is what you were saying, John, about that's where the work happens, is at the Hermit. So it's calling us to that right action and a higher level of action that's based on truth, and the truth coming from the High Priestess card. So anyway, I think that it's I like that there's that assertiveness and initiative in a sense that's behind the sort of more catastrophic feeling of the Tower card.
Yeah, that's right. And it is actually, it is indeed the exciting intelligence in the Kabbalistic sense, which means, does pretty much what it says on the label. And someone asked what deck that this was that we're looking at right now, and it is the, it's Edward Case's, or no, I'm sorry, it's Paul Foster Case's BOTA, Builders of the This is one that you get uncolored and you have to color it yourself. I think one other thing that I noticed tells about the tower, in terms of it being in the salt position of this arrangement and what the dissolution is intended to do, then is, like, again, I was mentioning before, it's like, you know, this is kind of a 1-2 punch to the to our egos, in the sense that we're cutting it down to size and bringing it on equal playing ground with our subconscious minds. But you could see that, this is requiring a complete sacrifice of salt in this case. You can see that one of the ways that I think how it describes is that it's the whole just clear up murkiness of the waters of this solution, so that only soul and spirit remain. Those are the two figures that are falling out of the tower for me, is the salt, the sulfur, and the mercury, after the salt has been completely destroyed.
I like too that these three cards in their inherent colors of red, green, and blue, represent that additive color scale of white light and the three modes of white light. And you don't see that in the other columns. And so this column or process is particularly pivotal because you're really working with kind of that pure essence of white light, or the pure essence that has come after you've burned everything away in calcination. And then you can begin to, it kind of marries the process of calcination to the next one of separation, in that, you're dropping into these three modes of the visible white light. And then separation is where you're kind of taking things apart to see how you're going to put them back together again. And so I like that reference to the additive light scale with the colors.
That's a good variation about that. Didn't even notice that before. And it's projected light.
Right. Yep. And I think one more thing about the tower is remembering its connection to the Lover's card, and that this is that same couple that after the Devil card has fallen kind of under the dissolution of a separate consciousness, as kind of like a test or moving through a plane. And so, the whole thing also does speak to that illusion of separate consciousness, that both the High Priestess and the Hermit kind of embody a little bit more of an alignment with. So then again, in the next phase, when you move to the Star card, in that sort of meditative or revelatory phase, that false construct of separate consciousness starts to get reconciled.
Well, does anyone have any other questions or comments before we move on to the last part of our program?
Sometimes I really want to switch the Tower and the High Priestess around so that the High Priestess is salt and the Tower is sulfur. And And I'm having one of those moments right now.
I mean, I can see that happening, most definitely. On the other hand, I can probably also see, like maybe there's an element of paradox in this particular operation, especially when we're delving this deep into the subconsciousness.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with the gentleman that just spoke. It's very tempting to do that, especially considering salt, you know, is a fairly stable molecule and represents, you know, a certain level of stability or realization. And then the tower is nothing but instability. But one of the paradoxes is that that is kind of the only true constant, right? Is motion and change. So yeah, I definitely can relate to wanting to swap that for sure.
That's really interesting because when you dissolve salt in its solid form, it's one atom of sodium attached to one atom of chlorine. It's one of the few compounds that when you dissolve in water, it all breaks down to its component ions. So you have sodium ions, chlorine ions, and when it's in solution, they're all completely separated. But when you dry it out, they recombine back to their original form without any variation. So when it's dry, it's intact, and then when it's wet, it's apart. But when it dries, it comes back together again without changing, which a lot of other compounds don't do that. They can change from the heat, they can change from the presence of other things in the water. But sodium will always come back together in its pure state, which is probably something that the ancient alchemists probably observed. And that's why it's here as part of their list of sacred compounds.
That's a good observation, definitely. And thank you, everyone. Okay, well, with that, I believe we will hand it back to Joy, which I believe you have a dissolution spread.
Okay, so yeah, well, I wanted to do something simpler this time, and so I didn't actually do a spreadsheet. We're just going to do more of an exercise. So grab your deck. Hopefully I always say, no matter what, always come to a tarot meetup with a deck close at hand. So that, because we probably will use it, not always, and lately with so much astrology and alchemy, it's less likely. But go ahead and flip through your deck and pull out those three cards we just talked about: the High Priestess, the Hermit, and the Tower. We're going to start with that. And you might want to get like I don't know, some writing materials, note-taking materials or something like that, so that you can jot down some ideas. Has anybody else been getting the Tower coming up a lot lately? Man, I've gotten it for almost every client, it seems like, or maybe not everyone, but it seems like a lot lately. Okay, so you can kind of lay your cards out just the way John had it laid out, with the High Priestess at the top and the Hermit in the middle and the Tower at the bottom. And Will, if you really need to do it the other way, go ahead. And so we're going to work with a see if I can find a pen that I know works. I found, when looking at this 7x3 table, I found that I'm really enjoying, Oswald Wirth has one paragraph on it, but he's so to the point and makes it so easy to understand. I'm like, okay, we're going with this. And so in that book, let me find it for you, page 37 of this edition, he has, I don't know if you can see this, he has these really nice tables that he lays out, and he describes it very simply. The top card of the table is the active principle, and it's the subject. And then the middle card is the action of that subject, it's the verb. And then the lower card is the object of the action. And so it's subject, verb, object, just like you write a sentence. And so the High Priestess is our subject, and the Hermit is our verb, and the Tower is the object. So the High Priestess is the thing that does, the subject of the sentence. The Hermit's going to be what she's doing, and then the Tower is going to be what's being acted upon. So she's doing something to something. So the High Priestess takes a Hermit action on the Tower. And so the first thing I want you to do is just spend a minute thinking about that and jotting down, what does that mean to you? Like how would you fill in that sentence? What is the High Priestess? I'm not going to say the High Priestess hermits, but I might say the High Priestess is the subconscious, and that the Hermit is alone, and so, or isolates. So I might say the subconscious isolates, and then whatever the Tower means to you. And again, you can think about words that we've already talked about and ideas that we've already talked about throughout, Penny's slideshow and my lecture and John's discussion. But just kind of come up with your own little sentence there. And so I'm going to just give you a minute or two for that. Oh, nice. The High Priestess ignites the fire of the Tower. The High Priestess casts light on our perceptions. These are beautiful. These are beautiful. I'm slower. I'm still taking notes. I think I've got one. I'm going to type it in here with these others because I like that idea. Okay, so there. And remember, make sure, double check your syntax and make sure that you've come up with a word for each card. So I tried to do it there in mine. So for High Priestess, I had intuition. For Hermit, my verb was forges a new path. And then the object for the Tower was brokenness. So altogether that came out as intuition forges a new path through my brokenness. Troubles to have seen the High Priestess as having volition. That's a great point. And I think a lot of these processes is that how does somebody work with it? How does somebody who can't act the way you see it, how do they, and again, just play with it. I mean, I think somewhere Will said at one point he was like silence, and I was like, oh my God, that's so perfect. Maybe the High Priestess, whatever word you have for the subject, maybe she is silent about something. So it's okay, no matter how you see the cards, you're still going to be able to come up with a subject, a verb, and an object. Inspiration from the divine. High Priestess ignites Hermit, Epiphany, Tower. Nice. Unconscious reflects the misalignment of the conscious. I like that. Perfect deduction retracts our concepts of what is refracts maybe our concepts of what is true and real. Really, really, really like this. The source separates the aggravator. Wow, these are awesome. Okay, cool. This is working. Okay, so so now that you've got your subject, verb, and object, and I'm gonna circle mine on my little, just wrote down a bunch of notes and then circled what I wanted to use. I didn't circle, which is what I'm doing now. Okay, so now I've circled the ones that I want to use. So now you've got your 3 phrases or words. You're gonna think about something. Now again, and some of you have been here since the beginning and some haven't. Back at the beginning, we talked about choosing something that we wanted to change within ourselves, something that we wanted to alchemically transform. So you're going to think about that thing if you chose something back in the beginning, and then we worked with that with a different type of spread last time. Think about that thing. And you're going to pull, and if you don't, and if you can't think of anything, you're welcome to just grab a random card right now and just say, show me what to transform, and work with that. But if you can think of something, and it's okay if it can be big or small, totally fine. It can be something that you can transform by the end of the day. It's something that you can take a lifetime to transform, or somewhere in the middle, doesn't matter. Ideally, we were kind of going for the idea that you would transform it throughout the 10 months of this cycle, but not everybody's going to be able to attend every time. So it's all up to what works best for you. So think of that thing within yourself or about yourself, or that you have control over, that you want to change, that you want to transform. And you're going to focus, first of all, on this keyword for the High Priestess that you just came up with. For me, it was intuition. And I am going to ask, what is my best expression of intuition? And I'm going to shuffle the deck and pull one card and put that down. Then I'm going to go to my Hermit card. I use the phrase forge a new path. And I'm going to shuffle again. And this time I'm going to concentrate on what is that new path for me? What is forging that for me? What is my best expression of being able to forge a new path? Again, I'm going to pull a card, and same for the Tower, which for me was brokenness. And so think along those lines and pull those cards. That's going to be your spread that you'll interpret. So I just clarified a little bit. I can't even remember exactly, to be honest, what I just said. So I wanted to make sure I clarified it. The questions are, what is this subject, this High Priestess word for me? What is this action, Hermit word, for me? And what is this object, Tower phrase, for me? So the next thing I'm going to do is my interpretation. Now I'm going to have to go super fast. Unlike normally I'd spend a lot of time. You can always go back and spend more time if you want to. I'm going to do a quick interpretation, and then I'm going to give you the next step. So give me a second here. Okay, so once you've got your interpretations, even these quick ones, done, you're going to look at each card that you drew, and you're going to find the visual cue within the card that most inspired your interpretation. So for instance, I drew the 2 of coins for the High Priestess card, for which I said was my intuition. And so what is my intuition for me? I think of this card a lot of different ways, but the 2 that came to mind right away, other than that it's Jupiter ruled, had Jupiter Pisces, and it was like, oh God, how literal can you get? Okay, so the 2 coins to me are balance, but also this riding a bicycle through the sea is the 2 different things that I was focusing on. And so I'm going to go with riding the waves as my interpretation. So my intuition is riding the waves. For me, when I think of intuition, it is about riding the waves. And so waves are going to be my visual cue. And then for my Hermit card, Forging a New Path, I got the 10 of Cups. And so for me, that was rest and comfort. I want a new path that has more rest and comfort. And I would say for me, that's the sleeping. I could have said it was a cat and dog, but for me, it's the sleeping part. So waves is my first visual cue. The visual cue in my second card is sleeping, and the visual cue in my third card. And so I'll just keep going with that. And so then the final step is the synthesis. And that's to look through the deck, and you've got, once you've done this, you've got 3 visual cues: waves, sleeping, and whatever my other one is going to be. And then I'm going to look through my cards and try to find a card that has waves. Here's the second one I picked. Okay, so I'm going to look through the entire deck, but it has waves on it. It has a sense of rest. It's 2 people that, like, there was the 2 dog and cat. And I have to figure out if it does have, the third one was my Queen of Coins, and I hadn't really done the interpretation, but there's jewelry on there, which is kind of a coin symbol. So this might even work for me. And so that would be my synthesis card. And of course, I'm going to look through the entire deck and double check, and I'll pull, what I'll do is I'll pull that one aside and make a pile of cards that I think work for that have all 3 of my symbols, my visual cues on it. And then once you have your synthesis card, then that's your alchemical transformation. That's telling you this is your way, your process, your unique path towards achieving the dissolution stage of your ultimate transformation here. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to open it up to questions and a conclusion here. Does anybody have any questions or comments that they want to share about anything that we've talked about today? We had some chats come in. Let me take a look. Nice. Glad you guys are liking this. Okay, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that is my trademark. Is no traditional meanings go off the image of the deck, because when you start studying with me, that's the way you learn to read. And then as we get further and further along, then you have to go really deep into the Kabbalistic and astrological associations. So those are more the traditional correspondences as opposed to traditional meanings. But you have to learn the intuitive way first, and this is the fastest, best, easiest way to do that. So in my opinion, is the way I teach it. So yeah, okay, cool. I'm glad this is working for people and you guys are liking it. Any other thoughts or feedback or anything? I think we're coming to a close. John or Penny, do you have anything to sum up?
Not I.
Nothing specific. It's all kind of dissolving in the waters right now.
Okay, we'll be back next time with separation.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Looking forward to seeing you next time.
Have a great April, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye. You all
Bye.
too.